As we're working in the studio today, our trainers are also keeping a close eye on the TV in the lounge. It's federal budget day, and one of the topics that many people are speculating will be addressed in the budget is measures to make housing more affordable. In order to make it easier for people to purchase a new home, the government introduced the RRSP Home Buyers Plan many years ago. We're going to cover it conceptually because while the numbers may change, the mechanics of the plan typically don't. With that in mind, I suggest that you refer to your textbook before your exam just to check on the current figures. If the mechanics of the plan change significantly, we'll shoot a new video. Consider the following scenario. Rakesh used to work as a sales representative, which involved living out of a suitcase 5 days a week. It made very little sense for him to own a home, so instead, he rented a small basement apartment. During that time, he managed to save $100,000 in his RSPs. He recently secured a new job that allowed him to work from home, so he's decided to purchase a condominium for $300,000. Rakesh needs a down payment of $15,000, which is 5% of the purchase price. Unfortunately for Rakesh, other than his RSP, he doesn't have any other financial assets. If he makes a regular withdrawal from his RSP to fund the down payment, it would be considered taxable income. So for example, if he withdraws $15,000 and is in a 30% marginal tax bracket, he'd owe $4,500 in taxes, leaving him only $10,500. That's not enough. Another strategy is to take advantage of the RRSP Home Buyers Plan, which is available to first-time home buyers. Now, the term first time is a bit of a misnomer because there's an exception to the rule whereby anybody who's not owned a home during the previous 4 calendar years becomes a first-time home buyer again. I get that this could be a little bit confusing. To use an analogy, it would be like me signing up to play rec hockey, a sport I haven't played since high school. I would tell my new teammates, listen guys, I've played before, but it's been a while, so treat me like a first-timer. The following 4 points will summarize the mechanics of the RRSP Home Buyers Plan. Number 1. You can borrow up to a specified amount set by the federal government from your own RRSP, provided of course you have the funds. Instead of it being taxed as a regular withdrawal, there are no immediate tax consequences. So in layman's terms, you're lending yourself money out of your own RRSP and do not have to pay tax on the amount taken out. Number 2, it's a loan, which means you do have to pay it back into your RRSP. The repayment period is also set by the federal government. Number 3, when you make repayments, you do not get to claim a tax deduction. This makes sense. You didn't pay tax when you took it out, so you're not going to get a tax break when you put it back in. And number 4, if you don't make a repayment when due, that amount must be reported as taxable income. For example, if you're supposed to repay $1,000 in a given year and don't, you'd have to report and pay tax on $1,000. Now let's go over the specifics, which again are subject to change and should be verified prior to your exam. At the time this video was recorded, the maximum amount a taxpayer can borrow from his or her RSP is $25,000, and by extension, $50,000 per couple. But the 2019 budget proposed changing it to $35,000. Eventually, this change will be reflected in the WME course. Repayments must begin no later than the second tax year following the year of withdrawal, which translates to March 1st of the third year. For example, if the money was withdrawn in 2019, there's no required payment in 2020. Required repayments must begin in the 2021 tax year, which means you have until March 1st of the next year, which represents the RRSP contribution deadline for that year. The entire loan must be repaid in equal installments over 15 years. So if $15,000 was borrowed, then each minimum annual installment would of course be $1,000. Of course, you can repay more than the minimum each year, as we'll discuss next. So what if Rakesh wants to repay the loan quicker than 15 years? In any given year, he can repay more than the minimum required amount, but it should be stressed that any additional amounts paid does not relieve the borrower from making a payment the next year. Instead, the minimum repayment is adjusted. For example, if Rakesh originally borrowed $15,000, then the minimum annual repayments are of course $1,000. Let's assume he decides to double up the first payment, so instead of repaying $1,000, he repays $2,000. The new minimum annual repayment is recalculated. $13,000 owing divided by 14 remaining years equals $928.57 minimum repayment. Alternatively, he could just keep making the original $1,000 payment and be fully repaid sooner. The government also offers a plan called the Lifelong Learning Plan. The mechanics of this plan are very similar to the home buyer's plan, as it allows taxpayers to borrow tax-free from their RRSP, but for the purposes of pursuing full-time training or post-secondary education. The amounts that can be borrowed, repayment periods, etc. are different amounts than the home buyer's plan, so be sure to consult your SeeWhy Learning study guide or textbook for the specifics.